Welcome to Inner Compass. I'm Shirley Hoogstra. When families climb out of poverty, they often leave their neighborhoods behind. So what happens to the at-risk population when that stabilizing core leaves? Today, we're talking to a longtime civil rights activist who has had great success in community development. So join us on Inner Compass.
From the campus of Calvin College, this is Inner Compass, exploring how people use faith and ethics to guide them through critical issues of today.
My guest today is John Perkins, the author of 9 books about community development and racial reconciliation, and he has ministered among the poor for 47 years and holds 9 honorary doctorates for his studies and accomplishments. Welcome, Dr. Perkins.
It's great to be here.
You have worked your whole life for the poor, and you talk about what the ghetto is and the fact that it's the have-nots remaining there. Well, you have 9 doctorates and you've written all of these books. You could have moved out. Why didn't you move out?
Well, I felt called to live in the community with the people. Yeah.
Because you talk about bringing indigenous leadership back into areas that are populated by the poor. Why is it so important to be in with the poor versus maybe just drive in and out?
Yeah, I think that one of the things I try to do best I can is follow the teaching of Jesus and follow the teaching of the Word of God. And Jesus himself then, and follow his example. He says, I am the way, I'm the truth, I'm the life. And John says, as he was, so are we in the world. And so he relocated from heaven down here to earth. He incarnated himself, and he spent his time among the poor. And he said to his disciples, the foxes have holes and the birds have nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head. So he relocated. And then the needs, he did not necessarily patronize people because he relocated with them, and he could feel their needs and their pain. It said, we have not an high priest who cannot be touched with the feeling of our infirmity. So he lived among the poor and worked among the poor. And people who basically have had a big impact on society in terms of changing people and making life better for people have basically identified with the pain of the people in that day, and that God calls us to come back and to live among the poor. So to me, relocation, living in the community with the people, is incarnational. And from that then, indigenous leaders can emerge.
But you say, take a long view. This is not a 2-year and then you're out kind of commitment.
Yeah.
That's what your life has been.
There's a need, of course, with young folks, there's a need to hone in your skills, get your training, but always listening for the call of God upon your life for your life's work and ministry. And then you can even begin to listen for a call. That might not be permanent, the call, but he's preparing you, and he wants you to see your mission as a life task. And when you feel that sense of calling, you need to go there with a sense of commitment. I would always say with a sense of commitment to stay there at least 10 years, and then after that you can begin to think about a decision of whether or not you want to stay longer. But most of us think that we can accomplish too much with a quick fix. I think we should look at people who come, and we love volunteers. We want to, but we see them coming to bring us labor, to bring us their mind and technology, but we see also us helping to stabilize them and to see the bigger picture.
It's a both and, isn't it?
Right, and it's mutual. That's the idea. I think that when we patronize people, when we think we are doing it all for them.
That's right.
You know, it's got to be mutually beneficial. And some people say you burn out if you don't have that mutual benefit. But so we feed on each other when we see it in the right perspective.
You say listen and learn and get the people with whom you are ministering with, not to, with, to tell you what it is that they need.
Yeah, we use a little poem in CCDA, that's the Christian Community Development Association. That's sort of the philosophy that we have on it. We call it the Chinese poem. It says, go to the people, live among them, love them, learn from them, plan with them, start with what they know, build on what they have, and of the best leaders, when our work is finished, our task is done, the people will say, we've done it ourselves. And that's the whole idea then. And from that, these indigenous leaders, we have went there and joined with them. Of course, we have shared our knowledge. We've shared but we shared it with people who really want to know it. Somebody asked me a question the other day: how do you select tutorers? How do we select disciplers? And really, the disciplers, to a certain degree, have to show within themselves a sense of need.
So they need to be learners.
Right. And it's not, we want to make it more mechanical, and we want to make it more these principles. But the way of giving yourself to people have a lot to do with how that person give themselves to you.
Right. When you talk about love and you talk about this long-term commitment, how have you kept the cynicism away and kept your heart open to loving the people God has put in your path?
Yeah, a lot of things. I think it's a sense of gratitude. People who have really put themselves in a position to lay down their life for me. Just like now, I'm 78 years old, and I've been able to serve God full time, you might say, for these 50 years. It has been because of the quality and the generosity of the friends that God has given me. Now, I'm now old enough, that I can survive the rest of the years, but because of their gratitude and because they have supported the work that I'm doing, that gives me a greater desire to want to continue to give myself to the poor and to the people who God has called me to.
So it's been a collaborative effort. People saying, I'm going to, out of my love for Jesus Christ, support John Perkins and his vision, his leadership in this area. Is it okay then for them not to have relocated and joined you there?
Very much, very much. Friendship is the highest of grace. If you notice in the life of God working with Abraham to show how God worked with people, how God worked incarnated in Jesus Christ, he worked with Abraham for years, and then he said, Abraham is my friend.
Right.
He worked with his disciples for several years, and he said, don't call me master anymore, call me friend.
Right.
Because friends know what each other's doing. Right. Friend, which meant that my friends who supports me are people who know what I'm doing.
Right.
And they support me not out of my necessarily asking them, right, but out of them seeing and seeing my need.
Lives locked together.
Right. And that's really been something. And I have never, in my ministry, and I've never had the real big gifts. It is all, and I sometimes, I'd be doing a project and I'd be saying, I wish somebody would give me $1 million. Yeah. But all these 50 years, no one have done that. I think that God has been trying to keep that faith in me. Give us this day our daily bread. Right. And I have even watched in my ministry, when we have had $50,000 or $60,000 reserve, as I go back and look at our ministry, I see, when did our ministry make the greatest progress? It made the greatest progress when we really needed it.
So when you really trusted.
Really needed and really trusted.
Right.
And had to ask God to help us. As I look back, when I see those sort of weak places in our ministry, it's when we had the reserve.
Right.
So that has been a grace. You could say that has been a grace in my life, not giving me more. Now, still, I wish somebody would say, let's test him and try it and see how he behaves. So I'd like to go through that test.
You're not willing. You're not saying I won't take it.
That's right, right. Test me, try me.
But what you're saying is that when you have the greatest need, you rely the most on the Lord. And sometimes when you have all the reserve, you say, I'm doing it. That's right. I'm in charge. That's right. Instead of saying, God's in charge, help out here. That's right. Tell us what you're going to do.
They think reading money can do it. I have watched that, and I've always been very heavy in the public school, helping the public school. But I watch it. I watch the integration of school. I watch the tile programs come in. And I watch how they kicked out, you might say, pushed the families out. Okay. Early on, when all the money came, and the idea was that the money
would solve the problem.
Solve the problem, and the schools now are no better off, and now they're asking for the people to come back, which is wonderful. Right. That they can see that. Right. So I never knocked the school, but there was a blindness in terms of thinking that money could solve all the problems. We need money, but there are human problems in terms of passing on wisdom that have to be transferred incarnational.
Person to person.
Person to person. The mother have to touch that baby. The father have to be involved in the touching of that life. And it's the same way in school. It's the same way everywhere. And you know, one of the biggest things that I tell people today is to older people, get involved in mentoring, get involved in tutoring, get involved in discipleship. It really enriches your life.
Which is why you say you've got to live together.
Right.
When you say tie your future and the future of your children with the poor, people who do that get a benefit.
Get a benefit in their children. All these years I've been talking about the 3 R's of development. The first R is relocation. Second one is reconciliation. The third one is redistribution. But that all of these young folks, white and black, others, who have relocated into the neighborhood intentionally to serve the poor, their children have done well.
Yeah, but you worry about that as a parent.
You worry about it, but they've done. But you see, you never turn your children over to institutions.
Okay.
Now, the institutions exist to assist the family, but never turn your children over to them. You're responsible. Somebody will come to me all the time. What should I do with my children right now? And after all of my experience, they said, what should I do with my children? I said, well, you know, I can give you some suggestions and ideas, but God gave those children to you. Don't think that the daycare center is going to do what you need to do. Although I like daycare centers. Don't think that the grade school is going to do, although they need to go to grade school, but there is that they need us into their life at all time. And in the end, we're responsible. And we can see that in my community. 84% of my children in the black and urban community is being raised without a father in the home.
And that is
a tragedy. That is a tragedy. Now you look into prison, we make up near about 60% of the prison population, and that is coming from about 6% of the population.
I know.
And so this massive amount of these prisons is coming from these young people who are the most neglected by their family and by the neighborhood and the community in which they live.
So the primacy of the family unit is what you're saying is something we have to preserve.
The family unit and the community, because you see, they both have got to be strong at the same time.
Okay.
See, it is the families fail and break from time to time. That's the story of Ruth in the Bible.
Right.
Naomi lost her family. You know, that's a broken family. She got restored, but it was the community that restored her.
That's true. They came back around her and was a support.
That's support. And so both of those have got to be strong, and that's what makes the ghetto so difficult. The successful people moves away from the ghetto and don't stay there. They become the models and the assistants and the skills, and we start talking about role models in terms of athletes. Athletes could be good role models, but more and more we're losing them because the Olympic people and the stars and our championship baseball players, they are cheating.
Right.
And so we want to teach children, and so we need some authentic disciplers in that neighborhood in which children can begin to model their life off from the teacher and off from the people next door and off from those people who love them in the neighborhood and in the community. And then they get that kind of affirmation from the people in the community. Because in our program, the first thing happens when the kids get their report, they come running home, and they come run. I'm talking about other children outside of ours too, would come running home with their report, because Vera Mae would always give them.
And that's your wife?
My wife. She would always give them $1. I don't know how she found all this money to give to these children. And so they're coming there. But you see, that would just encourage those kids.
That's right. It said, you're wonderful, you're valued, I'm proud of you.
That's right.
Someone was proud of them.
And all those young people, like she had, I don't know how many of her Good News Club kids played in the National Football League and played in the Basketball League and become reporters and doctors. And she just rejoiced out of doing it. And all the time they're saying, Miss Perkins, you're the reason I did that. Miss Perkins, you know. And basically what she was doing is just looking at their report card.
But she was there with them saying, you're important to me and you're important to God, you're important to our community. Do well.
That's right.
Do well.
That's right. That's right.
So when we think about being families to each other, what disappointments, what failures have you experienced and yet kept going?
Oh, break-ins.
Yeah.
Where we have a studio, it's not this sophisticated, but we have a studio, and some of the kids, I'm sure, from the community broke into it and destroyed it. That just creates a stomach sickness. Sometimes they break into the computer center. Well, those are the things that makes you sick. And then, of course, to see some of our kids who fail and go to prison.
Yeah.
Those are the things that really make you sick. And another thing is to see so many of our young men leave their wives.
Right.
And so many of them won't get married.
Right.
And they will be talking about that kid and making all that big thing over them like a toy, but they don't really care for them. Those are the things that really are.
Why do you think that happens?
It's by now it is what the psychologists and sociologists they call it sort of a pathological condition, that it doesn't happen so long that it almost have become a pattern and a custom in the society. And so there's so many reasons. But I think that nurture, discipling, having a person in their life is a powerful force.
And you say to your children on your street and the men and women you're mentoring, don't opt out. Don't opt out of the opportunities. Take the risk. Don't be afraid of failure. Do people take you up on that? Do they hear it?
Some do, and some, boy, it's becoming harder and harder because people are holding on, and they are faulting their mother, they're faulting their father they didn't have.
Right.
They are laying that, and they are owning that instead of overcoming that. You know, I couldn't do that. My mother died when I was 7 months old. My father was an alcoholic, and he gave us away. I didn't fault him. So I had to take responsibility for my life very early on. And it hurts me when I meet people who say, I'm just trying to make it. You know, you can do more than take care of yourself.
Right.
That we have the ability to do that. And that we should see some kind of significant in taking care of our family.
We've been talking a little bit about race and the importance of acknowledging race. What happens when people, especially today, want to say, yeah, race isn't a factor anymore. Everybody can just do it. Just forget about that. That becomes a problem.
It is. I think we got to recognize it, because even as the Bible calls us to live in loving relationship across racial and social barriers, and not to use race as a means of fighting and depriving each other, but still we keep our identity. Even in the end, it says there appeared before them people from every nation, every creed, every tongue, you know,
Yes.
before God. And so, yes, we don't have to be, he don't want us to be colorblind. He wants us to
Celebrate
have the
it.
beauty, to see color in terms of beauty. Why do we have to dislike color?
Right.
You know, in
It's
life.
creational.
Right. And so those are the kind of things that racism have deceived us with.
Right.
The idea. I think the first step of understanding the relationship that we need to build in race is that we need to recognize that all human being was created in God's image. And that great founding father's statement that we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all people are created equal and then endowed by their creator with certain rights, and among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I think if we, of course, we haven't lived that creed,
Right.
but that should be our goal creed, and that should be the way we approach people. And I think then we could then accept these races as being beautiful. You know, I used to, when I lived in Pasadena, I used to like to go to my Taco Bell.
Yeah.
Down the street, because when I would go to Taco Bell at noontime, it would be people there in Pasadena from all the Chinese would be there, the Japanese would be there, the Mexican would be there, the blacks would be there, the whites would be there, and I always felt good that I was there.
You felt you were in the kingdom of God.
I felt good that I'm here with all of these
That's
people.
right. That's right.
Yeah, and I felt good about it
Yeah.
instead of being fearful of
Right.
them. And,
Right. And the
looking at them with
differences.
suspicion.
Right.
It really enriched my life. And I find myself in a meeting. I find myself being pulled to that person that is the strangest, come from a different country, dressed a little different.
Yeah.
I think for me, it was coming out of that Brandon jail in Mississippi, being tortured there, and looking at the people who was torturing me, and seeing the twisted face they had, and then trying to understand that they didn't even know me, and here they was torturing me. Right. And so I think coming out of that and being healed from that, I think has given me a desire to want to love people. One of the things that really heavy on me now, as I see in Mississippi, poor white people don't have people nowadays that loves them and stand with them. The Ku Klux Klan used to do that, to
The poor
explore
white
them,
people.
poor
Right.
white. And then, of course, there was some of the rural, emotional churches, snake handling churches. They would stand beside those people. But those churches now have become prosperity churches.
Right.
And so they don't even like the poor.
Right.
So the poor white person is left out there.
Right.
They don't have no Jesse Jackson. They don't have no Al Sharpton,
Right.
at least, to come along and say. And so they're out there, and their own representatives exploit them. And if you hear what they're talking about, they're talking about the middle class all the time. They're not talking about the poor.
No, but I hear you saying, I want to love them.
I want to love them. And that's God calls us. I really believe the evidence ought to be the growing evidence, the discipleship evidence of our Christian faith ought to be our concern for the poor. Because the poor have not benefited from this wonderful creation. And so I think that we who have benefited from it, I think that's where the tenth come from, that's where the tithing idea come from,
Right.
is to make sure that the people, human beings who are poor, for whatever circumstances
Right.
that brought that poverty,
Right.
that they would be there to help them and to care for them.
And you say in your writings with Christian Community Development Agency, it's not about dependency, it is about respect and dignity in bringing a person who is poor into ability, into hope.
Into hope, and into a sense of self-achievement. We're back to the image of God.
Right.
God is a creative God.
Right.
And the human being has creative possibilities.
Right.
You know, I think about me dropping out of school at the 3rd grade. I think about a little boy in Mississippi. You know, as I look back at it, even then, back there, I thought about these things. And so I don't think we need to be writing people off.
Right.
You know, we need to be trying to reach them in a way that they can self-develop. Now, when I mean that, we are helping them with their self-development.
Right.
They're not just pulling themselves up by their own bootstrap.
Right. You talk about redistribution of both talent and skill back in with people.
That's the big deal. And money becomes a part of it, but money is not the first thing, because money is made out of something. And it's made out of ideas, it's made out of skills, it's made out of creativity, it's made out of hard work. It's made out of, you know, those are the things that produces money. We shouldn't jump all the way to the end. We should come back then. How do we help people get the mean to the end? And how do we help them then to feel a sense of fulfillment?
Right. My guest today has been John Perkins, author of 9 books about community development and racial reconciliation, and a minister to the poor. Thank you for watching Inner Compass.